Welcome to Super Saturday coverage of Tax Sutra. What an exciting day this promises to be, and we have wall-to-wall coverage lined up from 8:30 a.m. to whatever it takes at night. If this is going to be a redux of the 2012 Union Budget, believe us, we will be up post midnight, and we will have all the guests analyzing the budget for you. We have action-packed coverage throughout the day and late evening. You will not want to miss any bit of it. You can start following a live blog. My colleague Amay has already started live blogging. You're going to hear from a lot of experts in the next 2 hours leading up to the budget. And we have a special budget breakfast with tax nostalgia contributors Anish Thakkar, PV Srinivasan. Anish is partner with EY. PV Srinivasan is head of taxation at Wipro Limited, and Yogesh Tar, senior tax professional, partner with Bansi Mehta and Company. You have 3 tax experts with us, best people to guide us through what to expect in this budget, and also to look back a bit. This is the sort of day when you want to go back in time, look at budgets that have come in over the last few decades, and if past is prologue, what can we expect from Arun Jaitley? I request my colleagues to get me the newspapers, the headlines in the newspapers today. But before that, Anish, if you're looking, I just wrote, a couple of minutes ago that the Australian batsmen have fallen like 9 pins, and it seems as if the finance minister's budget speech may last a little more than the Australian batsmen have at Auckland.
Yeah, so last year I think the budget speech lasted longer than what we thought. I hope this year it's not very long, but yes, it contains a lot of proposals which are directional in terms of taking the economy to the growth of about 8.5%. That is being promised in the economic survey yesterday.
Yeah. PVS sir, anything that any particular specific expectation, 2 things you think he needs to do or announce in his budget speech, or you are expecting?
There are strong indications that the basic exemption limit for individuals will be enhanced. Economic Forum also, there was a mention by the Honorable Finance Minister himself that the exemption limit may be increased. What is the extent of increase is a matter of guess, but I presume that even if it's enhanced to 5 lakhs, it will not be a surprise. The second move which I expect is to possibly promote savings and give tax incentives. So you'll find ATC broadened with new instruments, and also the amount of deduction may go up. That is to benefit the individual consumers who will have more money to spend, and therefore propel demand in the market or propel savings, so that either of them will meet the economic purpose of 8% plus.
Yogesh bhai?
Yeah.
Yeah, Yogesh bhai, you can hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so Yogesh bhai, anything, PVS sir told us 2 things that he expects from the finance minister. I'll ask you the 2 things you don't want him to do.
I don't want him to do. You see, in the past, the budgets that have, the finance bills that have come, the finance bills have not been finance bills, but we used to call, or we call these finance bills in our office as Supreme Court Amendment Bills or Supreme Court Decisions Amendment Act, because the trend has always been that whatever decisions have come in favor of the SSEs, these have been sought to be modified and sort of reversed or nullified, and this has been the way in which the finance bills of last few years they have been doing. So certainly that is one thing that I don't want them to do. And secondly, really speaking, the retrospective amendments, which is something which, in terms of what we remember, the worst out of the earlier budgets, is something that I don't want them to do.
Yeah, Yogesh, when you look at the budgets gone by, I recollect your senior partner and tax legend Bansi Bhai Mehta's post-budget analysis 10 years back, and that was my first budget as a reporter, and I was with CNBC at that time. and I recollect the FBD. That was so controversial. Bansi took it apart, ripped it apart in his post-budget analysis at the Birla Sabha at Churchgate. You expect any memories of that budget, Yogesh bhai, or any budgets before that? Any 2 or 3 budgets that strike out for you? And would this be one of them, which I just told you?
Something which I can remember. I mean, as a positive feel-good factor was your long-term fiscal policy of 85-86 when Mr. VP Singh announced a long-term fiscal policy where all these buzzwords that are going on today, ease of doing business, stability, those were the feelings that we got at that point of time. And we did find at that point of time that the rates of tax came down almost for good. There were major changes in terms of abolition of estate duty, replacing or removing your allowances and replacing that by reduced tax rates. So that sort of a long-term fiscal policy measure is something which, as I said, is a feel-good factor and which one would expect in this budget, and especially when you're looking at the rail budget, the qualitative changes that has been suggested is something which one is looking for. So in terms of the past budgets, this is 85-86 is something which I recollect, and that's on the positive side. And on the negative side, of course, there are so many things to say. This half-an-hour session is not good enough in terms of SBT introduction. First 2012, because it had full of retrospective amendments and as I said, all your amendments to nullify the effect of the Supreme Court decisions and things like that. So it's more of an adversarial approach which was coming out from that budget. It was more of a bureaucratic approach to the budget framing exercise, and that is something which we need to really come out of, and we need to say that we are looking at in terms of ease of doing business in India. If you're looking at Make in India, if you're looking at growth, I think that attitude needs to change.
Anish, when you look back as a tax professional, Yogesh bhai went to 85-86. I mean, we call you Encyclopedia on Income Tax Act, Anish. You can remember 3 parallel citations. There is some snippet from one of the budgets of yesteryears. Any small amendment that you recollect, which caught your eye many years back?
If I really, look back, right, one of the amendments that, to my mind, has been retrospective, has been, not very much debated upon at a policy level, but which impacts everybody, is the insertion of 14A with retrospective effect in 2001. And I thought, there was one amendment which really should have been protested upon, very, very vigorously. And unfortunately, we see, the foreign institutional investors and the, foreign investing lobby coming and representing so strongly against, the introduction of GAR and the indirect transfer provision. But something which affects doing business, which is 14A, for everybody and anybody, has not been represented upon with such vigor, over now, I think, 14 odd years. So I think that's one, one thing that I would believe is something which, to my mind, just, how do I put it, lost its way a little bit.
PVS, let's move to some happier, for some happier moments. As a person who's been in corporate India for now almost 3.5 decades, any budget of yesteryears which brought a lot of cheers for corporate India?
I can recall the 1991 budget of the Honorable Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh then. I think it opened up. He did not touch upon direct tax laws alone at that point in time. He touched upon many other enactments in law which would possibly integrate India into the global trade. So that was a very landmark budget because it was not a single focus of taxes. It had larger other enactments also, which are hurdles to investments. All those things were removed. For example, FERA yielded to FEMA, and many more amendments were made consequently. So I think that was a very landmark budget, which I think the effect of that budget can still be felt positively because we are sitting almost 25 years later. Still, we find that that budget has a positive impact on India in attracting investment. So I will say that as a very positive one. The next positive one would be is that the law is amended to provide incentive to the software sector, and the way it has adapted itself from time to time to ensure competitiveness of India's exports and provide the right amount of incentive to the exporters of software in earning profits derived from the export of software. I think that has been a very positive legislation. In conjunction with that, the indirect taxes also has been keeping pace. So I would say the export thrust given through the SEZs in 2006 to continue the earlier thrust which was given through STPI and EOUs, I think that was a welcome feature for the Indian exporters, I would say.
Yeah, previous, I want to, since you brought up 91, so I'll fast forward only 3 years. 94 Finance Act brought in service tax. Now, 20 years later, we just carried an article from India Spent, which gave a very sharp analysis, very interesting statistics that for the first time, service tax revenues are going to exceed, the custom and excise duty collection. 20 years back, 2 decades ago, when this was introduced, did you ever think that service tax would acquire such huge proportions, sir?
Dr. Chalaya had pointed out at that point when the service tax was introduced, saying that 50% of Indian economy is constituted by services. The GDP 50% was constituted by services, and automatically it was inferred that services should be brought within the network of tax. So service tax was introduced in 1994. I do not see a great surprise because if more than 57% of our economy is now constituted by services, it is obvious that the revenues from services will also be commensurate with that size of economy. The difficulty, if I may have to say, is that the enforcement on service tax has been rather slack. So as a result, the potential which the service tax has not been fully realized. I am aware that the administration has reorganized itself to be able to capture the potential at some point in time. Even the negative list, which has got introduced from July 1, 2012, has not resulted in as much of buoyancy in collection as the policymakers would have thought. So I will say the potential is large. The introduction of service tax on services was welcome, but the ability to enforce that has been less than adequate.
Yeah, but Yogesh bhai, I know you discussed direct tax more, but yet I'm tempted to ask you about service tax. Did you anticipate such huge litigations? And now excise and customs, decades-old laws are more or less settled. Service tax, you're seeing a controversy a day, new controversies every day on service tax. It seems it will take some time for this law to settle in. Yogesh bhai.
Yeah, you see, it's about implementation and about an approach. You have good laws. You have good. I mean, as PVS explained, the rationale behind service tax that your large part of the economy is out of service, and therefore service tax is a good, tax to levy. But the whole problem is enforcement is what the PVS said. But I would really put it a little differently, that it's implementation. And in implementation, you take views which are adversarial. That gives rise to your litigations, because no one would having in place a good SANVET credit system, which over a period of time has been quite it has developed well, and you are pretty sure of your SANVET credits. But at the same time, you have implementation issues over there. You find faults. You make by notifications. You say that within a period of 6 months you should avail credit, etc., etc. Now, this sort of thing, which Parliament nowhere knows anything about it. It's the bureaucrats who does all these things. So that is what something puts us off. and it gives rise to litigation. So therefore, the attitude of the people who are enforcing the laws is something that needs to be changed, monitored, or it needs to be really seen by our leaders. If that goes well, then with a good Senvet credit system in place, I don't think people will really complain more about service tax. So
Yeah.
litigations really because of implementation issues.
Yogesh, by some specific questions on what we expect today. You expect a big bang budget on the tax front, or do you expect a more incremental one? Do you think the finance minister is going to do some big stuff? He's going to remove MAT on SEZ, he'll defer GA, he will, make a, give a commitment on GST. You think it's going to be quite big bang and just slew of amendments in the Income Tax Act to rationalize it, to, on the administrative side, or you think it will be more incremental on the tax side?
No, I would feel that it should be more. It should be a big bang. May not be in terms of numbers, may not be in terms of specific amendments today, but certainly in terms of the direction in which we would like to, direction in which we would like to go. So, say for example, Make in India, where smaller things like tax exemptions, etc., may come in. But we do need bigger things like, if you really want to make in India success, then you need to have something about technology absorption in India. And if you say that on technology payments you will continue to deduct 25% tax and litigate and have so many tax issues on 25% tax on technology payments is absolutely ridiculous, having regard to various treaties which pegs that to 10 to 15%. So if they want to make this as a real success, then I think Make in India will have to address this issue of of reducing or going back to the 10% or 15% days of technology payment tax. So that is a big thing which, if they do, I think that Make in India thing would be a success, and I expect that some such rational thing should come. Not just give the tax benefits, for setting up industries and things like that. If that is there, fine. If that is not there, then also I don't see much scope to complain. But these big things should really come in. On the other hand, if you want your Clean India, Swachh Bharat, etc., then what did you do last year? You said last year that the CSR expenses will not be allowed. Now, if you want corporates to really cooperate in your CSR, in your Swachh Bharat movement and various, economic upliftment of the rural areas, etc., you want them to do it, then certainly government has to be partner in that. And if the government has to be partner in that, then we should say that these expenses are tax allowable expenses. So these are the big things which are expected to happen if they want if they want all these sort of movements or Make in India and Swachh Bharat and things like that to be a success.
Yogesh, I'll come back to you in a minute. Yogesh, I'll come back to you in a minute. That's a fair point. CSR and technology payments. Anish, you advise a lot of financial investors, especially FIIs. FIIs are going to be glued to this finance minister's speech. They are going to literally hash split every word. This is the first big budget of the new government. What are the FIIs expecting generally and on the tax side?
I think generally, as everybody was saying, the expectation is that there will be, a long-term vision of growth, in India, Make in India becoming a success, such that the investment opportunity for the institutional investors opens up. Specifically on the tax side, I think 2 or 3 very key proposals that the FIIs are going to watch for are: one, what is going to happen to GAR? Is it going to get implemented from April 1, 2015, or is it going to be either done away with, which is probably everybody's it'll really be how do I put it a Santa Claus gift really if that happens. But at least the expectation is that it will be deferred to such a time when the tax administration is mature enough to handle GAR. Secondly, there's there's expectation that there'll be clarity on the indirect transfer issue in terms of what substantially means. Is it 50%? If it is 50%, then of what value, etc., etc. The third thing that FIIs really are expecting is that the 194LD concession of 5% withholding tax on corporate bonds, as well as the corresponding amendment in 115A, that remains. So these are, I think, the three key things that the FIIs will look for in terms of the tax proposal. One other thing that is was being talked about in the newspapers is the applicability of minimum alternative tax on the FIIs, and many of the FIIs have actually received notices from the tax department. And I was speaking to an officer of the tax department just yesterday, who told me that even the department is looking out for some sort of guidance from the finance minister, because the question of levy of MAT on FIIs actually stemmed from a CAG report that the department, was published by the CAG, saying that MAT hasn't been levied on the FIIs. So they're looking for, even the department is looking out for, the finance minister to provide some clarity on this.
Yeah. Thanks, Anish. PVS sir, your quick views on GAR. We are again and again saying we are going the different route. Once, twice, looks like it's going to be a hat trick. You also think GAR needs to be deferred? And is it just tax administration that is not ready, or is it also India Inc. which is not?
GAR as a public policy cannot be faulted. I think it has to be stated that it will be a good policy or good tax policy to have GAR on the statute books, but at what point in time you have it is also very relevant. I think at this point in time, the taxpayers are apprehensive about how GAR will be implemented. The assurances which have come through various committee reports and the acceptance of those committee report recommendations in changing the law, these are welcome, because the 2015 enforcement, as the GAR it happens today, what will happen is that it will not be a mere deterrent, it will also turn out to be a fear factor. If it's a deterrent, it will be welcome, but if it happens to be a fear factor, then I think it will drive away investments. It will be prudent on the government to defer GAR, maybe to a time when the tax administration is well trained, and there is some evidence of that well training through other processes and assessments which are currently on. We have not seen much of a change in the assessment processes, where less of appeals are preferred and more of acceptance of the assessment orders have happened. If that stage is visited, we will have a reasonable confidence that the tax assessments will be mature, and therefore GAR will be an exception rather than a rule. As far as Inc. is concerned, I think India Inc. or even the global Inc., if I may say, is not prepared to handle GAR, because it is a different animal. We do not know what will visit us and what a particular transaction will be visualized by the tax authority, though it may have a different legal sense, where commercially it will be looked at differently. The substance versus form is not easy to decide for anybody, and more so for India Inc. or the global Inc. So I will say deferring GAR will be a prudent mechanism. It will be too early for India to adopt GAR, because even the transfer pricing regulations, I will say, has got to settle only recently with the amendments which have been brought forward, and it has to be a diplomatic effort to settle transfer pricing dispute, with President Obama settled also along with 8% growth. I think GAR and 8% growth are opposites.
Yeah. PVS on GST, I want to pick your thoughts. It seems now more of a political hot potato than anything on the technical side. I mean, if you could just maybe segregate into two parts. The political part, which for now we will leave aside. Let's assume for a moment that the finance minister and the prime minister put the entire political capital behind GST and are able to achieve a political consensus, let's say in the next 7-9 months. What needs to be done on the technical front, on the technology front also, for GST, India to be GST ready, say in a year's time? Is it possible?
I presume that the constitutional amendment bill, the way it has been positioned, even the political consensus will emerge, and it is not too far away at this point in time. And I do expect a roadmap to be laid in the budget by the Honorable Finance Minister to say that GST will become implementable from 1st April 2016. So I do not see even a political consensus eluding as far as GST is concerned at this point in time. But be the case, as far as the technology is concerned, the entire GST framework is going to reside on GST network. The efficacy of GST network is not a transparent mechanism at this point in time. Though it has to work on technology, how efficient is the technology is still a black box. So if there is an assurance that the GST network is in good place, I think it would be a welcome feature for industry to possibly adopt GST immediately when it comes into force. One way of doing it is to possibly put the central levies today, indirect levies, on the GST network, so that there's a central GST, and we are all getting used to the central GST on the GST network, and we will be able to possibly transition the state GST also at a later point in time. So my guess is that how the IGST is going to be squared off, how the state settlements will happen vis-a-vis the IGST to SGST, I think that will be the crux of the issue. There are enough technology players assisting that mechanism, and I can see that this is not a challenge which will not be overcome. Certainly the administration is geared to meet it, but at this point we don't have enough confidence or the assurance from the tax departments saying that the GST network is working and working well.
Yeah, Yogesh bhai, an interesting figure my colleagues point out, and I'll read this out. The indirect tax collections, I think so far are a little over 4.20 lakh crore, and direct tax collections so far I think are close to 5.75 lakh crore. For so many decades after independence, after the Income Tax Act was introduced, Yogesh bhai, haven't indirect tax collections historically always been higher than direct tax? And look at the difference. The difference is almost 1.5 lakh crore with an advantage to direct tax. I'm sure none of us saw that coming 10 years back, Yogesh bhai. The difference is huge.
No, yeah, difference is huge, but at the same time, if you may call me a bit cynical about it, having seen the assessments happening on a day-to-day basis and huge demands being raised and collected and enforced, how much of this will ultimately be sustained by higher courts? You collect demands, you raise demands, you collect demands. Okay, now, and you don't give refunds. In fact, even today we have requests coming from the department to make your TDS payment of the month of March in the month of March itself. Now these sort of things go to show your high tax, direct tax collections. I only hope that that these are not these sort of things have not really jacked up these numbers, and these are genuine numbers.
I mean, Yogesh, I'd like to ask you here. Let's propose a solution to the finance minister. What would you suggest to the finance minister? How do we reduce tax disputes? You have now new benches of AAR, you have the APA mechanism, you have the settlement commission, which was sought to be empowered in the July budget. What needs to really be done?
If something innovative one can think of is to have illustrations in your legislation of how to interpret the provisions of the Act. If you have illustrations, then that would give clarity as regards interpretation. Otherwise, the interpretation issues are something which is creating these difficulties. You provide for tax exemptions, tax holidays, and at the end of the day, you say that this tax holiday will not be available to you because of this, because of that. You want a jack-up, you want infrastructure to grow, you want things like renewable energy sector to grow, then those tax incentives to infrastructure, energy sector, etc. will have to remain, because to enable them to be competitive. So, but then, having given these tax exemptions, etc., you at the end of the day, when it comes up to assessment, you find small issues and deny them the exemptions. Now, this is where the tax litigation comes in. That I'm taken unaware. I never knew that this could be interpreted in this manner, and that is where the whole problem is. So, therefore, a pragmatic approach, the purposive interpretation approach, which ultimately needs to be taken, and therefore, if you have some sort of a system where you have illustrations in the code itself, in the act itself, then
Yeah.
that may probably, address this issue in the long term, which I
Yogesh
believe.
bhai, Yogesh bhai, we are running out of time. Quick final word from all the three of you, starting with you, Yogesh bhai. 20 seconds. What do you expect on the tax front? What will happen today?
Tax front, what will happen? Tax SOPs have to come in terms of infrastructure, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of Make in India. Those things will have to come. Some small measures of increasing the rates, increasing the exemption limits should come, because you have to address public at large. This is what will probably come for sure, and a long-term roadmap needs to be drawn.
Yeah. Previous sir. Hello. I think previous sir. Final
I
word
see
from
2
you.
or 3 signals. Yeah, you are able to hear me? Yeah. I see
previous
2
sir,
or 3 indications. One, I see a lot of direction on tax administration. The government is serious about tax administration. So you will find certain provisions which will possibly bring certainty in assessments. Towards that end, you will find a lot of provisions being incorporated. So
Yeah.
that is one thing I'm looking forward to, and if I see that, I'll be delighted. I see a little roadmap on MAT being tapered down. 2/3 of the normal rate is not a MAT which is going to incentives you are given on the other hand. So if not a reduction in the budget today, there will be a roadmap as to how MAT will look, say 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years later. And because the railway budget is an indication, I feel the finance minister may lay out a long-term plan. While some of them may be adopted in the immediate year, some of them will be adopted in the next 2-3 years. So I would see some kind of policies which will adjudicate, maybe address the issues of long-term. MAT is one such issue.
Anish, you think this budget is going to be a budget which, as a nostalgia contributor, you would write after 10 years?
I think so, and I certainly hope so. As PVS sir rightly said, I think this budget is going to be directional in terms of how the tax policy is going to be shaped in the years to come. Administration, as sir said, is very, very important. You have the recommendations of the TARC, the Tax Administration's Reforms Commission, which has laid down in no uncertain terms in terms of what the tax administration needs to be like. So I think clearly this budget, in terms of deferral of GAR, as I said, in terms of putting out a long-term direction in terms of enabling Make in India, promises to be a landmark budget. And God willing, if I'm there 10 years down the road and still able to contribute to nostalgia, then I think yes, it's something that I would love to write about.
We aren't letting you go anywhere, Anish. Just some headlines. Here I should. Can you see the headline? The headline here is Economic Times. India will rise at 8. It says India will rise at 8. Audacity of hope. That's a take from a lift from Barack Obama's autobiography. Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian's maiden economic survey paints a bright picture of the economy, forecasting an 8.5% growth in FY16. That would make India one of the fastest growing major economies, surpassing even China. It, however, argues against a sudden burst of reforms. You have the Business Standard, which says, again on economic survey, high on growth, cautious on reform. PM reaches out to Congress, ready to change land bill. So this is all about the economic survey. The Financial Express, growth to jump, deficit on target. That's what it says. And let's look at the highest selling English newspaper in the country, the Times of India. The Times of India, it says, it starts with the Prime Minister's speech in Lok Sabha yesterday, nothing to do with the budget. and there is very little on the budget on page 1. It just says survey India ready for double-digit growth. Well, we'll find out in an hour and a half time. Thanks so much, PVS Yogesh Bhai, Anish, for joining us on this budget morning. A happy budget day to all of you. Super Saturday it is, and if I could just show if I could show our viewers that we even have a TV set here. I don't know whether you can see the TV set in Australia is all out for 151. Looks like New Zealand are going to win this and win big against Australia. The Super Saturday, at least on the cricket side, looks to be going the New Zealand way right now, and probably New Zealand is going to pull it off. India against UAE at 10 o'clock. We go will be covering the budget first, cricket later. Super Saturday it is, and can I ask if I can show, my colleagues are already at work. You can see my colleagues are already at work here, crunching the numbers, what to expect. Can I show a war room to them, Aditya? Can I? This is how the war room of Tax Sutra is going to look like on budget day. My colleagues are at work. All the action. And we are calling it the Tax Sutra dugout on Super Saturday. Sneha, any quick word on the budget? Big bang today? Sneha tells me it's going to be big bang. That it is. Thanks so much, everyone, and keep glued to our coverage. And the blogging, live blogging has already started. My partner Amay has already started his blogging, and we are going to have wall-to-wall roadblock coverage of Union Budget 2015. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.